I am so excited to have all of you here and to be talking with you, Jill. And it feels particularly rewarding because it seems as if we're in a moment where you've talked a lot about toppling the patriarchy, about being a part of the revolution, and with the results from the election, I think 9 trans people were elected to office at the state and local level. You know, and people are talking openly about what's happening as a resistance, so that's exciting. And then we're also seeing this exposure of behavior of people who are abusing their power to sexually coerce or assault women and other people. And that's really, I mean, it feels like every day there's a new revelation about that. And so I wanted to ask you, do you feel like, you know, that we're in a toppling moment? Is the patriarchy going down?
Yeah, I think, yes, the patriarchy is being toppled, it seems. Let's give that some applause. I think it's really happening. It's quite shocking, actually. I think when I said it on stage about a year or so ago, I was kind of joking. No, I wasn't joking. I just couldn't imagine that it could happen this quickly and this ferociously. This past week, or these past 2 weeks in particular, maybe the past month, I guess starting with the Harvey Weinstein revelations in Los Angeles, have been such an amazing just tsunami of change. There's just been a gigantic sea change around an abuse of power, abuses of power, and the patriarchy. You know, a lot of people are like, why are you talking about patriarchy or capitalism? Like, what does that have to do with any of this? It's like, I think the reason I said topple the patriarchy is because every single thing that happens when you realize that women or people of color or queer people don't have access to the experience of protagonism in life or in stories can be traced back to patriarchy and capitalism. And so patriarchy must come down. I don't know if capitalism is next, but the idea that men in power and men of power, and that power mostly belongs to men and should belong to men, I think is coming to the beginning of the end.
I wanted to ask you about, because this is about something we don't always think about, although I think you're very interested in making us think about it and making it visible, which is the labor of work that goes into creating culture, producing television series. And I saw an interview you did where you talked about being a showrunner and how you basically got thrown under a bus. And so you wanted to have your own show. And in fact, you said shows they're buses that run on the bodies of people who get thrown, you know, somebody has to take the fall. And it sounds like, you know, an abusive situation in general. And how much is the conditions of work or the expectations of work within this creative sphere part of the stories that we're hearing about Weinstein and others?
Yeah, I mean, I think about this stuff constantly, and I think because I approach the professional world of filmmaking and TV making with a kind of activist's intention, so thinking about things like cooperation, collaboration, circle-based Judy Chicago-esque people sitting, you know, consciousness-raising co-ops. I've brought that kind of feeling into work. What we used to do with the Annoyance Theater, a kind of yes and idea of a bottom-up or a group-based truth that knows something instead of the boss is right. And, oh gosh, here comes the boss. And, oh no, here come the people who have the money. We better get it right for the people who have the money. We better get it right for the boss. The boss is coming. We're in trouble. Which is kind of the way that most workplaces work, or a lot of workplaces work, which is this idea, you know, that that there are rules, and there is a boss, and there is money, and all of these things must be paid attention to first before the human beings. Gets us back to capitalism again. That the money, are we earning money? Are we doing it quickly enough? Are we in trouble because we're not earning money, we're not doing it quickly enough? This is a kind of unspoken thing that's underneath most ideas of work. You go to work at a certain time, you better be on time, you better work fast because you're making money for some unspoken guy. What we tried to do at Transparent was just undo all of that. Just undo all of it. By, I made an announcement at the first table read, that most people think we're running out of money, we're running out of time, we're running out of light. I suggest to you guys today that we have plenty of time, we have plenty of money, and we are the light. And I, came up with that idea to say that, while I was taking a bath the night before the table read, and I was like, that's too crazy to say. They're going to think I'm nuts. And then I was like, I'm just going to say it and see what happens. And it was kind of just an undoing, this undoing constantly of we don't really know what the best version of the show is. We don't know what the right version of the show is. We don't know what the most money-making version of the show is. But we're here for the purpose of love. And that was for the purpose of my own parent who had recently come out, and I think creating Transparent, writing the script, and creating the TV show was an almost frantic yearning and urge to try to turn the world so it would be a safer place for trans people and for my parent, where trans people could move through the world and feel not other. Mm-hmm. We were taking this otherness and transness and queerness and Jewishness and making it the subject instead of the object. And that was an act of love and I think protection.
You actually instituted a transformative action program on Transparent, or in the way you work. And you have, I don't know, have people been to Topple Productions and taken a look at the principles? There are 6 or 7 of them.
6, 7. Yeah.
There's some really great manifestos there as well. I really encourage you to read The Male Gaze. I was cracking up this morning rereading it. But so how does it, you have these gatherings where you're kind of giving people the confidence to go slow, to be thoughtful, to not be driven by these urges that come kind of outside. Mm-hmm. You're trying to center an experience that has been barely, horribly represented, put it at the center of culture, put it at the center of a show. What else? What other kind of actions do you do to kind of make that collective active?
Yeah, well, let me see if I can try and do it with you guys right now. Which is kind of just like we're all here in this church. I may not get it right. You may not ask the right questions. This may not happen in the right time frame. It's just like a kind of a holding space for the reality of what is, this feeling of like, oh, you guys are all here. Oh, hey, you guys are here. And we just kind of like ratchet down the expectations of like, gotta be right, gotta be good, gotta say the right thing, it's just like a kind of, we try to do this feeling on the set where we just like slow down and say, this is going to be the thing that it's going to be. Just kind of ratcheting down the urgency to just see if people can hold space for a sense of artistic risk. The feeling of like, okay, we're all here, we're all in this room, we're naming our presence in this room, in this church, with these people, or this temple. We're naming it, and it holds space for risk that might happen. We're talking about the space around the performance. We're talking about the space around the lines that have been written. We're talking about the space around the equipment, around the schedule. And so we're prioritizing, I think we're actually like prioritizing the souls of the artists in hopes that if the artists can be relaxed enough, everybody can start to play, and then we can film it. And that's what I think is the product of Transparent, is the filming of something that happened when we held space for a lack of expectations. So, all this stuff is pretty weird in Hollywood, where everybody's like, make more money, make it faster, what are the ratings? But just by turning those things around, I think we were able to have success, which is almost like this kind of riddle. How did we get Emmys and how did we get Golden Globes from not trying? And so much of what people believe success is you tried really hard and you did it and you worked hard and you made something and then it won. And it was like all we did was try to remove the pressure to be good, to be right, or to win. So yeah, we created these Topple principles. I named the company Topple a few years ago, just kind of like imagining that this moment would come, kind of getting it wrong, thinking the moment was going to come from Hillary being elected, and that people were going to be so excited about the fact that we had a woman president that they were going to realize that women and people of color and queer people could also be president. What a shock that it came in this way. But I think this common enemy of this fascist regime has actually given us a reason to come together, and we're just starting to come together now. So yeah, we wrote these principles kind of for this moment. I went to a meeting of all these really powerful women in Hollywood, and I handed out the Topple principles, and they're like, "Did you just write these today?" I was like, "No, we wrote these a few years ago." And one of them is gather often. Gather often, meaning we just try and sit in a circle and we hold space and people talk. The crew talks before we start shooting. We literally waste time on purpose at the beginning of the day when we're shooting. We stand in a circle and the crew takes turns getting in the middle and talking about how they are. And we literally waste time as a kind of anti-capitalist act because the more connected the people are. I mean, ultimately, we work faster, we work better. I mean, I see Jennifer Estlin here. These are things that came from the Annoyance Theater. Mick Napier taught us that we say we could instead of we should. He had a theory that on opening night, we never talked about whether it was good or not. We just celebrate that it happened. So we're always in the process of trying to celebrate that it's happening and staying in the present. And yeah, the Topple principles, I guess, found a way to make that happen, to start to write that stuff down.
I love it. Well, let's take a look at the results of the Topple principles. Let's look at a scene. This is from the latest season of Transparent. Are there people who haven't seen season 4 who are willing to admit it?
People who haven't seen season 4?
Well, you're going to see something, but it's okay because there's so much more that happens over this season. And this is the setup. The family's gone to Israel.
Yes, the family is in Israel season 4. They're on a trip, and we try to do some stories with Allie's connection to her body, her own sense of boundaries, the binary, this idea of female, male, this strict binary. Allie's beginning to experience in her body, and we're also in a place in Israel where these binaries, Jew, Arab, or Israeli, Palestinian, these binaries are starting to crumble, and we tried to put it all into one scene.
Let's take a look. So that's a pretty accurate representation of the emotional contours of the show, right? This really amazing moment of quiet and connection. I love that scene between Allie and Maura.
It made me cry. It totally unexpectedly made me cry to see it.
Yeah, because Maura immediately because a family that is together and loves one another, but their own kind of myopia or whatever sometimes gets in the way of them seeing each other, and that's a moment of recognition. And then you go to the usual chaotic. There's food, something's happening,
something's burning.
People are yelling.
I know. We realize that's one of our tricks is we say something awful and then we talk about food. It's like Holocaust food, and all the time. Since season 1, I was like, oh, that's one of our tricks. Do you feel comfortable in your body? Are you trans? Burning lemon bars.
Right.
Yeah, very common trick that we use. A reviewer talked about it as vigorous tonal shifts, muscular tonal shifts.
Oh, muscular.
Tonal shifts. Yeah.
Thrusting tonal shifts.
Yes, sometimes thrusting. I mean, it's amazing to watch that and realize beyond the fact that, I get to do all this work with Topple, that there are so many aspects of my personal life over the past 5 years that I've been able to synthesize by casting these roles and making this art about people I love and having these humans as almost doll stand-ins for me and my sister and my parents and my family. And it's a really intense way to make art. It's not like writing, or it's not like doing a play. It's like it's like we're creating an extra version of our lives and living in it.
Yeah.
And that's also part of what's going on when we're holding space, is we're holding space for the expectation of unexpected emotions and unexpected comedy, which is what's very different from the way most directors come to the set. And, I won't say men, but I'll say a sort of masculinist or a patriarchal idea of being a director is that the director has sat at home for a month with a piece of paper charting out what's going to happen. I used to learn from directors who would draw maps like it was a football telestrator. And the camera goes here, and the camera goes here, and then the camera moves, and the person moves, and they would show me how to direct. And they were using this kind of mathematical movement map that said, when we go down to the set, this is what's going to happen. And if the actors don't do it, you have to figure out the thing to say to make them do the thing you want to happen. That's what directing is. You plan a picture, you go down to the set, and then you get everybody to do what was in your head. Mm-hmm. And that's really hard, and it's painful on the body, it's annoying. And this other thing that we do is we come up with a script that might be the things that people want to say, but I always say a script is an invitation to show up, and that's it. The script lets people know where we're going. Okay, we're going to a settlement, we're going to an apartment building, a settlement where, Allie's sister Sarah's lover's mother lives.
And her lover's mother is essentially the same age as she is.
Yes.
And she's having this moment of seeing who her lover is.
So we know that that's quite enough, really. You don't need to plan much more. That you just get everybody there. You get the actors there. You get the script there that lets them know that, Allie's trying to get to a settlement and Sarah's trying to get the, present to her lover's mother. And then we just see what happens. And really, so my job as a director, if I didn't actually direct that episode, Gabby Hoffman did, but if I did, the job as a director is just to show up and feel. And that's it, is to just feel. And then to, in real time, figure out what to do next while you're having the feelings, which is one of the reasons why I get so upset when people act like women don't have natural talents for directing, or queer people or people of color. Well, they haven't learned enough yet. Well, men or white men have their hands on directing. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they've been doing things like, this is one of the things that drives me crazy about this idea of male directors, a preponderance of male directors, flipping through the New York Times holiday, here come the movies, and going, directed by a man, directed by a man, directed by a man, written by a man, written by a man, directed by a man, directed by a man. And I'm like, what is happening here? How is this happening? That movies that are being produced by Hollywood, that are a product, a cultural product, that create the imagination of our entire planet, are nearly 100% the ideas and the execution of white men. And I go, I can't believe this is happening. And then I remember, well, they told me, I learned that if you're a director, you started playing with the Super 8 camera when you were a boy. And that's what directors are. And the truth is, or that's what writers are. Writers are these men who have been figuring it out since they were boys. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, women play dolls when they're little girls, which is exactly what this is. It's dolls. Women write in their journals and tell the story of their lives from the moment they're little girls, so much more than boys do. So they're telling stories from the moment they start talking. And women also storyfy their lives more. They tell the story of what happened. Well, then this happened, and then do you think he's going to call, or the date, and then, but what about this? Women are storytelling all the time. And yet somehow men have been able to get their hands on the idea of writer and director and tell us we're not good at it yet, we're not good enough yet, Well, we would like to have more female directors. We would like to have more queer directors. We would like to have more trans directors. We would like to have more directors of color. But first, we're going to give you a workshop. We're going to create a diversity workshop for you at our studio, and we're going to put 30 of you in a room, and we're going to keep making the movies. And we'll put our diversity people on the diversity workshop, and they'll come in and they'll check in with your workshop to make sure that you women and people of color and queer people are learning. And the truth is, all I did is sit there and feel my own family's story. And that's one of my frustrations about patriarchy, is that everybody who thinks they don't know enough yet to be a director or to be a writer actually is on the receiving end of a patriarchal culture that is pretty much white men saying, I want to keep telling the stories because it's really fucking fun to be the storyteller. Being a director is so fun. You create a fake world to live in. You cast people in it. You get to go live in it. You get to tell everybody what to do. And it's also fun to be corroborating your own perspective. So the male gaze, G-A-Z-E, not G-A-Y-S, I've gotten in trouble before. The male gaze, G-A-Z, is filmmaking. It is one man putting his arm around another man and pointing and going, that. I'm the director, you're the cinematographer, that woman, that person of color, that queer person, that trans person. It's white, hetero, cis-normative maleness going, we see together. And the audience member is assumed white, hetero, cis male, and the director is assumed white, hetero, cis male, and they look at us. And that's fun. I know because I'm doing it now. Right. It's much more fun to be the looker than the looked at. It's so much more fun to be the seer and the writer and the director than the person being seen. And so all of these guys who were saying, well, we're the only ones who know how to do it, and we have a bunch of experience, and we've been doing it since we picked up a Super 8 camera, they're lying. They're lying. They're lying because they're trying to protect their ability to keep their hands on the camera, on the script, on the gaze, on protagonism, and on power.
This is almost literally the story of I Love Dick, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Dick is the
true.
patriarch who is toppled by the end of it, or sort of, really exposed for what that actually is, what that power looks like. I wanted to show a clip. Why don't we look at a clip from that, and then we could have. So the scene that I'm going to show is the curator of the gallery, Dick's Gallery, who is sort of has been brought in probably through some sort of diversity initiative, but is having to basically realize Dick's vision of what art is, which is very, conceptual, masculine in many ways. And there's a scene, now you directed this episode, A History of Weird Girls, and it's a series of direct addresses to the camera and women talking about their desire. So just quickly, this scene starts with her confession that as a young woman, she really liked Alex P. Keaton, and the kind of ideological confusion that created for her, so we'll pick it up sort of where she's talking about that. Great. Scene from I Love Dick.
That makes me cry too, because of my mom. Like both of the watching these things, like when I talk about privilege, to be able to salute both of my parents with my work, and that was my childhood, watching my mom, civil rights, ERA, licking stamps, gathering women. It's so moving. I just feel so moved by the fact that I've had the opportunity to really look at the phases of our family's history, commit them to film, share them with the world, share them here with you guys today. It's such an amazing privilege, and I'm just thank you for picking these clips. They're both so emotional for me because you guys want to stand up? My mom, Elaine Soloway and Carrie Soloway. Take your time. Just wanna stand. Woo! I'm so grateful for the childhood you guys gave me, and for the memories, and for a life that is so incredibly, I just feel so lucky that we get to.
Yeah.
That when I talk about male privilege, I talk about men being able to tell their stories over and over again, and gather sympathy for their way of life and for their own stories. That's, to me, what's so moving about this is I meet so many women and so many trans people who didn't realize how much they weren't seen in culture and in media until they start watching shows that are that come from a female gaze or a non-cis gaze, and it just kind of warms you, and you feel held by,
right.
held by the depiction of something that feels familiar.
These are characters who are in many ways liberated by their sexuality. They have a freedom to explore sexuality, to explore gender, but the kind of thing that holds them down is family history, individual history, the broader history, queer history. I mean, in season 2 of Transparent, there's, you follow the Pfefferman family back. I mean, that happens again in Israel. To this period of Weimar Germany, Berlin, where there was this flourishing of queer culture and that exploration of sexuality. How soon did you know that was going to be part of the structure of what you were doing with Transparent, which does start with your family, your exploration of gender and sexuality? How soon did you know? I'm going to go all these different ways.
A lot of television shows are actually about families. That's something that somebody taught me, of how to make a good TV show, is to create a group of people who can imitate a family. So whether it's Mary Tyler Moore in The Newsroom, or it's The Bar on Cheers, or even Game of Thrones, that what people really like watching for the most part is a group of people who are working out the same kinds of things that everybody has from their own families, their own struggles. So I think even before Transparent, 6 Feet Under, I think that's one of the things that I probably already knew, was that that at the heart of any great TV show is a family that you can follow along with. I think fictionalizing things and making things up has never been my strong suit, and so trying to start with things that felt real, like with Afternoon Delight, with Transparent, with I Love Dick. I think in many ways I Love Dick is about what it felt like to make Transparent in some ways, because I Love Dick is about using people in your art. I Love Dick is about thinking you're doing one thing but then being seen for doing something else. So there are so many aspects of what we were trying to do that got seen, and then many other aspects that didn't.
Yeah. The other thing, I don't know if you noticed in the clip from I Love Dick, when it goes into the closet where she's masturbating, there's that kind of white animated, and that actually it's a technique from a feminist filmmaker, Naomi Ullman, her film Removed, and every episode of I Love Dick has a film image representations, feminist filmmaking. So that kind of what you were talking about earlier, that men control the gaze, they control the means of production, that there is this history of women making movies, and making movies about women's lives, and making movies about women's sexuality, or about queer sexuality. And so was the intent there then to kind of rewrite this history? So you're telling a story about toppling the patriarch, and you're kind of inserting all of these different ways of being in the world and representing the world.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really go into much of what I'm doing with a very specific intent. It is more of that feeling of, where do I want to live? What do we want to do? What's happening with the people around me? How can I inspire them to keep making things? To be in community with other artists and other feminists. So Sarah Gubbins found the book I Love Dick, and when we read it and read that a woman named Chris Kraus had written a book, 20 years ago, about attempting to create protagonism out of this abject feeling.
Yeah.
The abject feeling, the pain of not having had, of not being the protagonist, the pain of being the object, the pain of being the other, and trying to create a self out of naming her otherness and naming her pain is, I think, what Chris Kraus did. And we absolutely wanted to, and I Love Dick, go and find those buried movies when people say, well, women haven't made great movies, or there are no great female filmmakers, or where's the history? You know, we know on one side that the history has been kept down, and on the other side that male and white male and cis white male perspectives have been hoarded, opportunity hoarding and perpetuation of privilege by propagandizing. I know it's a lot of P's. Propagandizing privilege by perpetuating protagonism, which means men telling stories about men being heroes, mostly for other men. Everybody else who wants to watch can, if it makes enough money. But mostly, this is the world we grew up in. This is the Old Testament. This is the Bible. This is the world we grow up in. Men telling stories about men. If women want to come along, they can. But a story from a female perspective is dangerous. It just kind of upends reality, upends capitalism, and so it's, well, that woman doesn't get promoted, and well, we're not going to make that movie, and we're not going to choose that movie, and it's all under this idea of quality control. Well, we need people who are good, or we need people who are experienced. That was part of what we wanted to do, was go and find those movies and say, these movies have been made, they've just been buried. They made it to a film festival, but they didn't get out of the film festival. It's quite a sort of emotional time right now when I think about what's happening in Hollywood in terms of this reveal. You know, it's like the kind of thing I've been feeling my whole life, have been unable to really name. You know, I think David Foster Wallace talked about, like, a fish looks around and at some point goes, oh, water. But the fish didn't know it was in water. The fish just thought it was alive. And so women are looking around now, and we're saying, yes, it's everywhere. It's been everything. It's our experience of ourselves. It's our experience of protagonism, of being the subject instead of the object. And so for me, part of what's enraging and emotional is not only have men been saying, we'll take all the money to make the movies, we'll hire our friends to make the movies, we'll buy screenplays from our friends, we'll make overall deals with our friends. I think 90% of overall deals with studios right now are with men. We'll take all the money, don't worry, we got this. You guys will have to learn more before we let you have the money. And not only have they been taking the money for themselves, they've also been spending money on payouts and settlements to silence women. Almost an equal amount of money to secretly cover up one another's acts, to secretly sit in boardrooms filled with men, saying, this woman has a story. How much can we pay her to not tell it? Should we pay her $2 million, $5 million, $32 million the woman got paid to not tell her story about Bill O'Reilly? I want that $32 million to make a movie. It's unbelievable. It's just it's really a reckoning. It's a reckoning, mm-hmm. And it's emotional. It's been an emotional few weeks, and I'm so ready for what's going to rise out of this. But I think I'm still in the pain of really feeling the degree to which so many women have been silenced. And not only these stories that are being told where 5 women can say, well, Louis C.K. did this very inappropriate thing, illegal thing. He did this illegal thing. And I wasn't allowed to tell because of capitalism, because of all the men protecting Louis C.K., all of the men going, he's our buddy, he's a cash cow, he's hilarious, don't tell your stories. We'll bury you if you say this out loud. That's 5 women who finally were able to say, I'm going to say this out loud. There are hundreds more who probably who I know did things with Louis C.K., where they weren't sure the whole time what was going on because of aspects of the ability to consent when you're not the boss, informed or meaningful consent if you're an actress who's there on the set for her first day on the set. So these ways in which this gendered violence has been making women question their own reality. Well, did I consent? I'm not even sure.
Gaslighting.
And also just like power and what it means to say yes and what it means to say no, and why sometimes people don't say no because it means they're going to be out of a job. I know women who haven't said no because they're afraid it's going to incite more violence. I know women who haven't said no because they want to rewrite what's happening in their head because they think if they can change their consenting to, well, maybe I am consenting, then maybe they won't experience it as violence. So there's so much happening right now as women are beginning to just understand what the cost has been for us being other.
What I think is interesting in your work in relationship to this, it sort of moves in a different direction, is the way you're committed to exploring sexuality, a whole range of sexuality and sexual expression. But with Afternoon Delight in particular, there, you wanted to represent this woman and the way she embodies her sexuality, or how she expresses that in the ways it's being curtailed by other kinds of names or roles she has to play. And you do that like in Transparent. Allie gets involved with a professor, Leslie, and there is a kind of weird, the way they meet. A lot of the boundaries are being pushed. It's a very sort of unstable situation for Allie. Like, she's going into a hot tub with this person that she's gone to talk about an application, a college application or a graduate school application, and then they end up in a relationship. And then the beginning of the next season, she finds out that Leslie is being investigated for having inappropriate relationships with students. Or Sarah, and I'm not lumping these all together, Sarah, married to Len, at some point explores her attraction to bondage and S&M and decides to turn, instead of being on bottom, turns to be on top and unleashes this really violent rage against this woman. Not beating her, but like yelling in this super violent way these things that she wants to do to her that are about mutilation and things like that. So can you talk about, because you can see that there's this beautiful full range of sexual expression that women can own and is part of who they are, but there's ways in which some of that stuff feels like it could bring calls of like, this is triggering or this isn't PC, and how you walk that line.
Well, I'm interested in boundaries. When you say how I walk that line, I realize like my work is really all about boundaries. And I think a lot about gender and boundaries, and the original boundary and binary of female and male, feminine and masculine, woman and man. And I used to think a lot about, and I still think a lot about, this idea of the divided feminine. So what happens in patriarchy and what happens with the male gaze is that the feminine is divided into good girl, bad girl, wife, other woman. The girl's girl and a guy's girl. That's what I'm hearing a lot now as women are deciding how we're going to rise up. Sometimes you'll get in a room with some women and they'll be like, oh, we can't include her. She's not a girl's girl. She's a guy's girl. HR bitch is the sort of joke name of a girl who's going to be on the guy's side. So that's what's happening right now, this divided feminine. It happens all the time because of patriarchy and because of male power. Women compete for access. Well, I'll be the wife and I'll take care of his children. I'll be the good one. And that's the slut who he slept with, who's going to be destroyed by me and my friends. Or I'll be the girlfriend. I'm hot. I'm still sexy. That's the stupid wife over there who doesn't even get sex, but I do. This divided feminine is the most basic way in which patriarchy divides women from themselves. And that's only two. The truth is that the divided feminine is huge. And it started really with the written word in the Old Testament dividing women up into angels and witches and the many wives. And the truth is this is a friend of mine who's a rabbi told me that depending on how you translate it, angels can also mean goddess. The word for angels can also mean goddess. And so my friend told me that, in the apocryphal story where God comes to Abraham and says, are you sure you want to kill Isaac, that sometimes it says the angels came. And sometimes, which means goddess came. Goddess came. A woman came. Mercy came. divided up into angels. So this is the divided feminine. We are kept from our power by being one of two or one of thousands, tiny angels. But where is goddess? Where is the sacred feminine? What's happening now, which is really interesting, is there's a divided masculine. So men have been holders of the currency in the past. Women compete for access to the currency. We divide ourselves so that we can compete. What's happening now is that women are being projected as the holders of morality, and men are competing for access to our moral good graces. Men are like, I'm not like him. I'm not like that guy. I understand what consent is. Well, I'm one of the good ones. He's a monster. That guy's a pig. That guy's a monster. And so men are now being divided, and where they get to pick a side, one or the other. The truth is that neither should be divided, that there should be a wholeness for both genders, and the sort of breaking up of ourselves to compete is a degradation of our truth. So for me, I had an acting teacher say, your purpose on earth, Jill, is to repair the divided feminine in our culture. And I was like, okay, thank you. I did not know what was going on with this. I knew I was doing something, but so I was really focused on repairing the divided feminine for the past decade, and saying, women, inside every woman is many women. Inside, we are multitudes. We are the Madonna and the whore. We are the sadist and the masochist. We are the wife and the girlfriend. And that just became limiting, as I started to think about gender in a broader way. I didn't only want to think about what the feminine was up to, but wanted to think about what the masculine was up to. And so now, as the masculine is going to get to be divided about the moral men and the immoral men, which is what's going to be happening, I think, over the next year or two, that's going to be another problematic divide for men, to have to ask these questions of what is okay. There's this thing getting projected onto women right now. Well, women know what's okay. Men don't. Men can't keep it in their pants. Men can't be trusted. I even had to tweet, stop men, or men shouldn't come, men aren't safe to hire anymore. You can't hire men, it's not safe. But that's just as problematic, really. It's just as problematic to create this idea that any gender holds the keys to any particular thing, like morality, like wholeness, like anything. That's the problematic nature, I think, of gender, is that people use it for these ideas. I keep finding myself in these rooms with women who want to say, well, we're all women here, so now we can say we're all the good ones. We're good because we're women. And men, they don't have a clue. They just think with their dicks. They don't know shit, right? This is the current mood amongst women. And I guess it's fine for a little while. I think we need to say it. We need to say that for a little while, but it's not going to serve us for very long.
Well, let's tap into the current mood of our audience.
Okay.
And we're going to be taking some questions. There are microphones coming around, so put your hand in the air.
There's also one on the balcony as well.
There's one up on the balcony. Yay. So just raise your hand in the air and keep it as short as possible so we can cycle through a bunch of them. So where are we going? If you will stand up when you get the mic. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Jill. I'm so thrilled to meet you, or pretend that I'm meeting you. My name's Carrie Side, and I saw you years ago in LA do Sit and Spin.
Oh, wow.
And I was so inspired by it that I started my own group in Tucson, Arizona called Monologue Cabin.
Amazing.
So I want to thank you because I discovered I'm an artist by trade, and I have been for 25 years, but when I started that group, I became a writer, and I discovered that I was a writer. So, thank you. My question is, who inspired you when you began writing, and who are your favorite writers, and what was the spark that gave you the permission to be so much yourself as a writer?
Wow, thank you for saying that about your group that you're doing in Arizona. That's really exciting. That's like my favorite thing that people say, is that something that I've done has inspired them to be creative. I have to give props to my mom here, the original writer, Elaine Soloway. We grew up in a neighborhood called South Commons, and I just brought these Commons commentaries to Chicago to show my mom. It was the newsletter. She was writing the neighborhood newsletter, and she was walking around the neighborhood with a wagon delivering it. My sister and I were following along, and she was delivering to the community the idea of itself. And there was a revolution going on. This was a revolution about not only the ERA, but also for people of color. There was a revolution going on, and we were part of it. And my mom was writing about it in the neighborhood newsletter. And we never had a dining room table. It was always her office. And their computer. It was a Red Selectric when I was little, and then it was a K-Pro when I was a teenager. And she felt called upon to synthesize the mood of our community into a narrative and distribute it. Mm-hmm. And it was hilarious. She wrote a great column called Adam's Rib. She's an amazing artist and an amazing writer, and I think, living in a house knowing, watching my mom become herself every day by naming what was happening around us, I think that motivated me to do the same.
Nice.
We have a question in the balcony.
Sure.
All right.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here. My question is about the scene in Transparent that comes shortly after the scene that you showed here, where Allie is back in Ramallah, and she ends up in that with her friend in that shelter, the tent, and she celebrates. It celebrates the great glory of uncertainty. I thought that Allie is uncertain about what to do there. She feels attracted. Your characters are very low on the impulse control scale. But in this scene, she just embraces her full uncertainty, and I thought that was so wonderful, and it ties into what you're saying about the divided female. Sometimes we just need to be completely uncertain, and so I wanted to hear you talk about that. Scene.
That scene. Well, that scene's interesting because, one thing that's funny about that scene is I got to say the thing I've been really wanting to say about 69 for a long time, which is I don't get 69. I think 69 is awful, and I don't know why everybody was trying to get us to do 69 coming, is one of the first things you do when you have sex, like, oh, try 69.
It's the patriarchy.
What is 69? Yeah, it's awful. This was like, what if I was one of those people who was at like a women's march, just like end 69. And so I got to put in her mouth this thing like, oh, it's only popular because the words 6 and 9 look alike, and it's a cute idea, 69, but actually, like, it's really hard to have sexual pleasure when two people are trying to do the exact same thing to each other at the exact same time. Like, where do you focus? Are you giving? Are you receiving? Anyway, that was fun to be able to put those words in her mouth. And then she also, Allie also looks at Life, and Life is wearing a binder, and Allie says, Allie goes to take Life's binder off. Do people here know what a binder is? This doesn't seem like a very queer crowd. A binder is if you are wanting to appear more masculine, you can wear sort of a chest compression tank top, which is a kind of, sort of gives you a more of like a flat look. And Life says, oh, I don't take my binder off during sex. And Allie says, oh, I'd never realized that you can like decide whether or not you want to have your breasts involved when you're having sex. So it's a real sort of comedic and dramatic moment about what consent is. That's the privilege of this show is, as I'm going through this place in my life where I start dressing more masculine, and I go, well, what does it mean if I move through the world without makeup, without getting my hair done? Just over the past 5 years as the show has happened, the first year or two I started going, okay, where do I go? You're going to put me here, and you're going to give me a dress to wear, and you're going to do my hair and makeup, and then I stand here, and thanks, because everybody's telling me, PR people, like, this is what you do. You get a dress, and you get your hair done, and So I was just doing what everybody told me to. Like, professional Jill means you get your hair and makeup done, and you put a dress on. And then I was like, I don't want to do that. What happens if I don't do that? What happens if I don't wear a dress, if I wear a suit? Okay, that feels better. Okay. Wait a minute. What happens if I don't spend a couple hours turning into a Barbie doll? Like, because I don't like it, and I don't really have the time for it, and I'd rather be writing. So why am I consenting to turning into this, like, glamorous object when I get filmed? Like, consent. Like, this is the thing, I think, for women, is, like, the idea that we want to be looked at as objects, that we want to be adored, or we want to be admired. Okay, a lot of women do, a lot of men do. A lot of femme people like being admired, a lot of butch people like being admired. But somehow, because Jill's a woman, Jill's going to get the full hair and makeup treatment. So I sort of, that was one of the first places I stopped doing it. Then I stopped doing it in real life. And when for me, as I started to move myself from this idea of the scene, I better be cute, I better be pretty, my hair better look good, and started to become the seer in my own mind, it changes everything. Yes, it changes what you think, what you think sex is, and what you're doing when you have sex. Every couple days I remember what sex is, but for the most part I can't figure it out. I'm like, what is this thing that people are doing? It just makes no sense to me.
It's fascinating because,
and I remember, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah,
it's such an odd thing.
But I mean, it is fascinating about these characters that sex, it is an instinct in a way, right? But it, and usually we're told to trust our instincts, but when it comes to sex, there's this like danger or some, that's not the way to go. But it feels like your characters really use sex as a mode of exploring the world, of gathering knowledge.
Yes.
Of, it's Allie's sort of attraction to life that takes her into Ramallah and to this whole set of questions that then bring her back to questioning, I think it was
I think it's like the body, the body as the Christopher Columbus, the body as the ship. And I think that's actually what happens to women a lot. And this question of women consenting, I think, as a young person, that men sort of consent by doing. The doer is laminated onto masculinity. The done to is laminated onto femaleness or femininity. And so for women, I think I did use my body as a kind of all-access pass to experience. I wanted to know what would happen, so I stalked the cars at the Whitehall Hotel, we put ourselves in situations as teenagers, as young women, where we simply showed up with our female bodies to see what would happen. Right. It's a kind of sacrificial doing. It's a sacrificial allowing, which creates for this confusion around consent, and I think that's sort of what I'm attempting to explore with the characters.
We've got a question back here, and unfortunately this has to be our last question as we're over time.
No.
Hi. As a film student, I really relate to the idea of like always having to be the best, always having to show your best self. And I especially relate to that as a woman, and I feel like people with oppressed identities oftentimes in these industries have this idea that they don't just have to be good, they have to be the best. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice of how to live in your ideas of that, like, relaxed, you don't have to be the best, you just have to feel and live in the moment when you are surrounded by a world that says you have to be the best because you're a woman or because you're an oppressed identity.
Well, I am often trying to be the best relaxer. But I think, again, in a pre-essentialist mind, I used to say things like, well, women are really good at holding space. Essentialism is this idea that women are one way and men are another, and that's kind of a thing of the past. But when I was encouraging women to do things like relax and let go, I think it always did have this sort of like riddle at the end of it, which was, if you can relax and let go, it will actually deliver you the best product. Another thing from the Annoyance Theater, process over product. This is not something that just women can do. This is something that anybody can do. When you prioritize the process and you really are interrogating yourself and your set with this feeling of, are we free enough? We have to be free. Because remember, we're making art using our bodies. when we're making films. We're filming skin, blood, water, muscles, light, movement, and the best way to allow the bodies to feel things is to slow down and let go. So this thing in film sets where it's like, all right, everybody get ready, and action! It literally does the opposite of letting a body relax and feel emotions that you can photograph, which remember, we're photographing emotions. So when I look at the way that patriarchy and men have, what they say filmmaking is, you stand on a mark, the camera goes here, it must be like this, done, cut. Like, I literally think that simply being the best means just doing the opposite vigorously of what you've been told filmmaking is. So for me, it's often reminding people over and over again that we're here to make art, we're here to have fun. The word play comes from the word play, meaning play, theater is play. And I just am always trying to be really good at creating space for that feeling of going back to that childhood moment of letting go and truly playing, which is what is at the heart of art making.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Can I ask you one final question?
Yes.
Where is the revolution taking you next?
Yeah, I'm just talking about the revolution constantly, guys. I think, I think I try to run off these phrases all the time when I try to say women, people of color, queer people. I try to say those three all together. So you're talking about women, people of color, queer people. And I think that some sort of alignment around people who have been feeling otherized and their allies will create a new protagonism that can take down the patriarchy. I think it's happening. I guess we should keep doing it.
Good words to live by. Thank you all. Thank you, Jill Soloway. Thanks so much.